Sledge is here. Hello.
Oh, did he make?
Hello.
Oh, there. Okay, yeah, I saw someone come in, but I'm not wearing my glasses, so I didn't see who it was.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard,
So I
Justin.
guess we have to be good now.
Yes, yeah, the teachers in the room. We all have to be. We all have to look busy.
Please no.
Now, as for your question on Abramelin and caffeine, yeah, that's something that's not really mentioned, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's a major issue. Like, if you being in the class, if you were to say that you were, drinking coffee during the 6 months, I would not tell you that's putting the brakes on your efforts. But at the same time, think of the spiritual traditions like Lent and other things where you give up something, you
Yeah.
sacrifice something, and and especially when it's something that's adverse to your health, and so the rite of Abramelin is just 7 days long. That is the ritual, those 7 days at the very end. The 6 or 18 months before that is the preparation phase.
Yeah.
So the entire point of that lengthy preparation phase is to give you an opportunity to break old habits. You got to stop going out into the social world, into whether it's bars or clubs or whatever. Stay at home, and you have to stop. You have to change your diet, and you have to it wants to break you from the old life and then let you start fresh and in a more healthy way when it comes to your diet into the new life. So that is a perfect time for you to tackle the caffeine issue because you're already doing that. So why not include the caffeine?
Yeah.
So yeah, on a spiritual level, I don't see it as all that harmful, but it is a drug. It is something that you're taking, and and the way you describe it, it seems like it very much is a crutch. Which I can understand. I mean, I'm kind of useless before my coffee in the morning and in the evening. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's a good idea that this is something that you clearly want to do. And I think that it's something that you should offer as part of the sacrifice that you're making. Everything else you're sacrificing in your life on that altar, you can
Yeah.
add that to it. And that goes for a lot of the other things that you may be wondering, does this count? Does this count? In the and this is something else I go over in the class, how the way the book of Abramelin is written is it's not step one, step two. It's written in the sense of here's the best case scenario, but if you can't do that, you can do this, and if you can't quite do that, then and it steps down, I mean, you could do Abramelin locked in a prison cell if you had to. So there's always a way you can do it, even if you can't do the best case scenario. But always keep in mind the best case scenario is to go disappear into a cave for 18 months and have no contact with the outside world whatsoever. So that's just you and God out in the wilderness until you come back. So that's your best case scenario. Any question you have on should I, does this matter? It may or may not in the larger sense. Like I said with caffeine, I don't see that as a deal breaker. You can't complete Abramelin if you drink coffee. But always ask yourself, will doing this move me closer to that best case scenario? I can't go live in a cave, but will this be more close? Will this be closer to that than doing it this way? And so you can always opt for whatever option will take you closer to the best case scenario.
It's also a funny issue this would have been a non-issue when the Abramelin was introduced into Europe because coffee hadn't made it to Europe yet.
Do
Yeah.
they have any caffeine
I mean,
vehicle?
maybe in roots and stuff like that, but no, like tea,
There
caffeine
just
don't make
wasn't
it to
like a
the.
big thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's the opposite in the Kabbalah. A big deal in the Kabbalah is all these midnight vigils that you do. You go to sleep and wake up at 1 in the morning, 12 in the morning, whatever, the middle of the night. They didn't have clocks, but
Yeah.
there's this 1-to-1 correlation between both Sufism and Kabbalists doing all night vigils and the introduction of coffee into the Ottoman Empire.
Wow.
And
I mean, that's awesome.
there's been some great
Huh.
studies on the rise of both how Sufism and Kabbalah basically would not have developed the penitential practices that they developed without caffeine.
Without coffee
Coffee was a
or
huge part of
or caffeine.
how they operated. And if you've ever had Turkish coffee, it's not just a coffee. It's like
It's
drinking
yeah.
sludge. And they
Yeah.
would drink 30 cups of it a day. I mean, it was really nuts. But anyway,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, they would be. I mean, talking about altered states of consciousness, that much caffeine. plus just being up for days at a time, then doing all these Kabbalistic or Sufistic meditation. They must have been
30
must have.
cups?
Yeah, I mean, in Turkish coffee, which are tiny little cups, but
it's like super espresso.
Yeah, it's like very powerful espresso. But yeah, so this is it's an interesting question about, Paracelsus, right? The poisons about dosage. So it all depends on how you
it's a medicine at this dosage, but it's a poison at this dosage.
Right.
Well, I do know, how does that play into there used to be a more common practice. What do they call it? Anyway, I don't remember the name for it, but you actually it was common for people to wake up in the middle of the night. You would sleep for a while in the evening, and then you'd sleep in the early morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning. But around midnight, you might get up and go for a walk in the garden, or hang out, or spend quality time with the wife, the spouse or whatever. So was
study at midnight is considered to be the most sacred time to study Kabbalah.
Because the world was quiet and asleep, and
also the idea is that it's also the time where evil is the strongest, and therefore you're like the lone knight against. It's a dark night, right? So you're
the candle in the darkness.
You're the candle in darkness, really. Beating while everyone else is sleeping. You're righteous enough to get up to study the Zohar or whatever to beat back the shadim. So it's like it's really it's all wrapped up in this medieval night culture as well, like knightly culture, chivalric culture. But yeah, that develops beginning in the 16th and 15th centuries, at least in the Kabbalistic world. It's still practiced, and there are some people. I'm one of them who's a biphasic sleeper. That my ideal sleep schedule is to go to sleep around I don't know, around 10, then wake up in the middle of the night, then take an afternoon nap. But it's biphasic sleep is. It's an interesting thing, but yeah, the whole role of coffee and the development of mysticism is and philosophy. You think about Kierkegaard and all those guys just drinking tons of coffee, and you notice the length of books just balloons when coffee reaches Europe.
It's like the link between corporatism and cocaine back in the 80s. There have been no 80s without cocaine.
It's like, how can they work for 6 days straight?
Yeah, I wonder how.
Below. Yeah.
But it's funny you bring up that thing about getting up, to be righteous enough to get up to do it, because the one major rule in Abramelin that I had to break, you're absolutely not supposed to sleep during the day. And that's really a rule about not being lazy. You're supposed to be up and be active, and it tells you not to sleep in and lay around. But when I was doing Abramelin, I worked overnights. I had no choice but to be up all night and sleep during the day. So the way my Abramelin worked was I had to come home, do my morning prayers, go to sleep with an alarm set to get up at noon, crawl, zombie my way into the oratory and sit there and do prayers, and then zombie my way back to bed and crash again until it was time to get up to do the evening prayers and then go to work.
Well, the text is very flexible. I mean, from what I remember, I'm not an adept by any stretch, but it's flexible. It's like, look, if you can do this, do this. If you can't do this, do that. The times that I've studied it, it seems like it's a text written by a person who lives in the real world, and you still conduct your business. You still you still see your wife. A
lot of people don't know that the text specifically says that you can continue working.
Yeah.
People have this idea you have to go buy a house and live away from it. No, it says if you are your own master, then delegate, meaning you own your own business. You can delegate the work to other people and recuse yourself. But if you can't do that, then, and the whole book's that way. This is your best case scenario. But if you can't do that, then do this. And it's a fine line to walk, because especially with because I teach this in a class, and students like to take the easiest path. Well, the book says I don't have to do this. I can do this, and I can do this, and then and I have to pull them back and say, okay, look, you need to err toward the best case scenario and not take the easier path out. So in my classes, I tend to be almost very strict, and I sound dogmatic. You have to do this, you have to do that. But yeah, the text is not written that way at all. It's
it seems like a lot of texts like that, at least Kabbalistic texts, where the logic is sort of you get in what you get out. You get in what you put. You get out what you put in.
Put what you put in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even Abraham himself. I mean, it's encoded into the tradition, because Abramelin lived out in a cave. and he was doing the full thing. But Abraham could not. Abraham had a life, so
Yeah,
he
he was a
went and
business
did it in
person
a
or whatever.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so and then then the next person, Lamech, would have been in a different situation. So yeah, it's very much like I said earlier. I don't know if you would come in yet, but I said earlier that you could do Abramelin locked in a prison cell if you had to.
Maybe even ideally in some ways.
In some ways, the isolation would be superb, but in other ways, you wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that it says to do. But I mean, it all really comes down, and that's what makes Abramelin stand out. It's because Solomonic magic is spirit work, and spirit work is about protocols, the magical timing, and what you wear, and just every little detail. But with Abramelin, it's not like that because you're appealing not to a planetary sphere, but to what in the Kabbalah would be absolute, or in Gnosticism would be the pleroma. So there are no protocols. There's no symbols. There's no associated incense or rituals or all that stuff. It's all just you and God. You kneel in front of that altar, and it's very Buddhist in the sense of the oratory is your refuge. The sukkot is your refuge. And you're not in there to perform rituals and say these and thous and ye's and sound highfalutin or show how you've memorized prayers or texts or conjurations. You're just there to talk. Hi, God, it's me. And this is what's happening with me. And he has you do that for months and months on end, and then brings in the ritual, that 7-day ritual where you start kicking ass. But yeah, the one of the hardest things that I have with my students is just convincing them to let everything go. Let the rituals go. Let this thing you're studying go. This awesome book you found, let it go. Let all this go. No, you don't need to incorporate this name. You don't need to use this talisman. No, you don't need to use these drugs to get your, clairvoyance going. You need to just put everything away and seek silence and refuge and peace and quiet. And if you can just do that for 6 months, at the least 18, if you're really going to go for the whole thing, you will see the benefits of it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really admire about that ritual is that it's like the kenotic aspect of it. That it's an emptying much more than it's let's dress in all this lion's pelts and stuff, which I mean is badass in its own way.
Oh sure. I dress up like an Egyptian and march around in circles once a month.
Yeah, that stuff. I mean, that's just like great. The aesthetics and that stuff is fantastic. But there's something really kenotic about this. And this is a place where I think that the Abramelin does express some connection to a likely Jewish origin. Is it Kabbalah Maaseh or Kabbalah Maasit, practical Kabbalah, doesn't look very ritually demanding. No, it's what's going on under the hood.
Yeah,
that when you're doing practical Kabbalah, you just look like you're engaging in typical Jewish ritual. It's just that your intention's dialed in a very different way. And so this is why you can't tell a Kabbalist on the street. I mean, unless they're really trying to flaunt it, like by wearing a white kippah or something like that on a day that's a weekday or something. And that's people who do that. I don't know. I see a white kippah on a weekday and I'm like, you're just humble bragging that you're a Kabbalist.
Trying to show off.
You're trying to show off that you're a Kabbalist. And I'm like, that's the whole, I shouldn't be able to tell you a Kabbalist from anyone else off the street, but it's that lack of, I guess like ritual drama. That's about, it's about stripping things down to basics. And that's, Kabbalistic, in most Kabbalistic magic, as much as that exists, when the rituals people are often disappointed to read them because they're like, you mean I'm supposed to lay to felon? They're like, yeah, but you lay to felon in a real hardcore way. You're not doing it on you're not doing it like on your phone with your business partner trying to get something out of customs. Like
exactly.
Yeah. So
and plus, I know when I would read a lot of those, the older texts, is they were like meditations. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, in my mindset, they were fascinating. But yeah, there wasn't pageantry. You weren't doing. They had not adopted the Greek passion play concept that got into like Masonry, Rosicrucianism, and all that. It's their meditations. You're just praying, but you have to. There's they tell you what to focus on and the names to intone and stuff and. Yeah, very. You can hear
that in the Hebrew word for prayer, right? To pray in Hebrew, the word tefillah like Hebrew
Tefillah.
verbs. Yeah, tefillah is in the hit pile. The verb is in the hit pile. Hit pile verbs are verbs that you do to yourself. So like the word for to kill, if you want to make the word for to kill oneself, you just take the exact same verb and put it in that verbal form. So tefillah, as a Hebrew word to pray, doesn't mean something you do outside. It means something you do to yourself.
Within. Yeah.
And so it's like, it's a very different concept of all prayer is about turning inward in Judaism,
like the descenders of the chariot.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's a very different orientation of movement. Even the word ora et labora, like pray and labor, ora has a sense of like going out. It's a very different conception of prayer. That's why also prayer in Judaism is often quiet, silent. Like you should say it loud enough that you can hear it, but no one else can. It's typical in the Amidah prayer.
That's what Joshua ben Joseph was teaching. Go into your closet, which meant bedroom at the time, and pray.
Yeah.
Don't do it out loud in the streets, because that's like you said, that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing.
Right. Right. I also see Alexander Eth from Glitch Bottle in the chat.
He's being quiet over there.
Yeah, man. I really enjoy your work, and I'm sorry we've never been formally introduced, but it's a pleasure to.
You two definitely need to get together.
Yeah, we should definitely get together and hang out, or
I hope he's there. I think he's muted, but I don't know if if he maybe stepped away from the keyboard or something.
Yeah, well, that's
hey, I'm here. It's such a pleasure to meet you, Doc. Love your work, and it's I was gonna say, you guys are ruining I'm sitting back with a cigar and some brandy, enjoying the conversation. I gotta unmute. This is great. I love your work, Dr. Sledge. It's so great, and Aaron, of course. And actually, I think a good question for both of you, to Billy's point, just about the not anxiety, but just diving into Abramelin, is something you kind of touch on, Dr. Sledge. You touched on it a few moments ago about the not non-climactic aspect of it, but just the chop wood, carry water aspect of it, and not expecting fireworks for 18 months. I'd be curious what both of you have to say about that.
Aaron, you have to take it first, man. You've done the deed. I am but a humble academic who studies an old book. You're a ishma say, we say in Hebrew, a man of deed.
Man of deed. Well, I tell you what, I feel like a broken record with this old story. Yeah, and I know, Alex, I've talked to you about this before too, but when I performed Abramelin in 97, I was still very much, every day I was still talking to Ashani Lele, and he was like my primary teacher at that time, magic wise. And he used to make fun of me through the entire 6 months. He would laugh at me, and because I would talk about what I was hoping from this, what I was striving for. And he would laugh at me and go and do this high-pitched voice. He would go, he says, in 6 months, you're going to be sitting there alone in that oratory. And he says, and you're going to be like, what? No flash of light? No puff of smoke? No demon? And, it was funny. And I thought it was cute, but I didn't really think much of it until I got there. And yeah, there was no flash of light. There was no puff of smoke, and, while I certainly did conjure these entities and get the oath from them, it was nothing that would have been interesting. It was not Hollywood special effects. Let me put it that way. It was very subtle. In fact, it was so subtle, I was not sure if it was not just me making it up in my head out of desperation. And I actually got angry. I felt real anger. This was probably a day or two afterward, but I was in this mode. It's like, did anything happen? Did this work? I don't know. Did I see what I think I saw? Did I just make it up? And I started feeling like I had failed. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but I asked Oshani a question. I didn't ask him about Abramelin. I asked him about Ocha, which is a crowning ritual in their tradition in Santeria, which is in Lukumi, which is very similar to Abramelin in many ways. And I just asked him what someone who had just been through OCHA should expect afterward. And that's when he revealed to me why he was making fun of me, because a lot of people go through OCHA with the same false expectations he saw in me. And he told me, no, there's no big thing. You do it, you do the work, you've done the work, and then there's like a period of rest. And then in their tradition, they do the 7-day ritual, and then there's like a year and a day or a year and 6 days or something like that. And then they do another ritual to wake the Orisha back up after it's been bonded to your head. Whereas in Abramelin, you do the purifications first, and then you do the 7 days. So I kind of felt just flapping out in the wind after the whole rite was over. And Abraham in the book doesn't really talk about that aspect of it, how quiet it will be. And, you're not, because in the book, he's talking about how this glory will fill the chamber and this angel's going to go over every aspect of your life and point out your mistakes and tell you what your destiny is. And he makes it sound like it's all going to happen right there in that moment. And it doesn't. It unfolds over years. So I went to Oshani and I went to some other people and asked them questions, not telling them why I was asking, but each person answered me in their own way. So not the same words, but from their own perspective, but basically saying the same thing, that don't expect the fireworks. Things are quiet now, but this will wake up. And when it wakes up, it's going to blow your mind. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened. So having been through that, now I see students going through my course going through the same thing. And it's like, no, just like Oshani tried to tell me again and again not to expect the fireworks, that it's going to be subtle and quiet, and you're not even going to realize what's happened. But saying it and experiencing it are two different things. And I've run into a number of students that are in my exact position. They get through with it and they didn't get what they expected. And so they feel like they failed. And because we're talking about the subtleties, I had one student who was afraid that he failed. No, I take that back. He wasn't afraid that he failed. But because I described the angel as sleeping for a period after the rite is done, he felt he couldn't get the angel to wake up. He's waiting for the angel to wake up. And just every time I talked to him, weeks turned into months, turned into a couple of years. When is the angel going to wake up? And so I started counseling him and talking to him and having him describe to me what was happening in his oratory. And as these sessions went on, it became apparent he was going in there and having full conversations with his guardian angel. He was putting questions, he was getting answers. The whole thing was happening, but he wasn't seeing it. It was happening in such a subtle way. So yeah, this kind of thing is so quiet and so subtle, and it is not what the idea of having these angelic and demonic summonings and these great visions, and you're probably not going to have the vision of Ezekiel, in that particular moment, because there's so much going on spiritually speaking. But what will happen, the things that will astound you, are going to unfold very slowly over the months and years after the ritual is done. Did that cover anything that you were asking? Or did I go completely on a wild tangent?
Oh yeah, I thought that was great, because I just think it's so interesting to peruse the vellum ensconced grimoires, and Abramelin's a different tributary, but it's just great to have that reminder about, there's not going to be, Hollywood special effects, Michael Bay-esque things every time you engage in a specific.
Not even a
ritual.
dark song.
Right.
Aaron, I think I want to do, actually, about speaking of that movie, is I would love to get you and a couple other people and do like a movie watch.
Oh my God, I've been wanting to do that for years.
And a live recording of the commentary.
Yes, because I hate that movie so much.
That's exactly for that reason. I like it, but I probably like it for completely different reasons that you dislike it. And it'd be neat just to have like there'd be a couple of people I have in mind that would be cool to do a watch of that film, and to get
I'm in
practitioners from different perspectives to see what they appreciate and also dislike about that movie.